Next slide's from the Holy Innocents Episcopal School. Their religion class, the teacher came in and said that we're no longer going to say, hey guys, you're all going to say, hey y'all, and I want you to practice this. Right now we're going to all say it together, hey y'all, because that's not an inclusive statement. And not everyone identifies in that way. The next few slides are...
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
We've got a full room here. When anyone is at the podium speaking, we're going to respect them. We're not going to allow any outbursts. Just want to make that very clear. Thank you.
What is going on in the schools? A lot, it would appear, but little of it seems to have much to do with educating young people.
Who pays your salary? Shame on you.
What had been planned as a typical school board meeting in Virginia's wealthy Loudoun County this week devolved into pandemonium.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
With hundreds of parents flooding an auditorium to accuse the school system of teaching their kids that racism in America is structural and systemic, something the school board denies is part of the curriculum. Things got so heated that the board members eventually walked out, leaving the police to deal with the unruly crowd.
When politics infiltrate schools, it's a sad thing, but it's also a very natural thing considering the government technically runs the public school system and determines funding for it. And local school board positions are voted on in local elections. Nobody listens to me when I say you gotta vote local. It will have the most felt impact on you and your family and your community. Even if you don't have school-aged children, pay attention to what goes on with your local school board, because those children are a part of your community and they will grow up to be adults in your community. Now, as I'm sure you all know by now, because I feel like I say it in like every other video, I live in Texas, and the things going on in Texas give a lot of us pause. Our state government is trying to siphon money out of the public school system so that private schools, most of which are religious schools, can get some of those public funds. I know that I talked about the Texas voucher program in another video we did back in July, so I'm not going to rehash the point, but if you want, you can check out that video to learn more about it. Now, just outside of Beaumont, Texas, which is over on the east side of Texas, a middle school teacher was fired for assigning an unapproved illustrated version of the Diary of Anne Frank to her students. The spokesperson for the school district said that the teacher read a passage from the book in which Frank, who was barely a teenager when she began writing her diary, described male and female genitalia. Again, we're talking about middle school kids here, kids who are around the same age as Frank was when she first wrote these passages. Now that said, there are versions of the text that omit those passages, but the particular version that was assigned to this classroom remained loyal to the original text. I am a literature purist. I don't personally love the idea of altering any author's work in any way, especially not after they've died, but I'm not sitting on any school boards. Another district in the Dallas-Fort Worth area removed the unabridged diary from its own library, and this graphic novel edition was removed from a high school in Vero Beach, Florida. Now, I will let you decide what the real motivation was for removing this particular book from school libraries, but it is a shame to discount the messages of an entire book and deprive people of the experience of reading a book just because some people don't like one or two passages within it, passages that aren't even particularly relevant to the rest of the book. People are going to feel differently about this, and that's fine. I think a somewhat reasonable argument could be made for the abridged version to remain in schools in the name of compromise. Sure, if I was a mother or a teacher, I would be willing to meet halfway on that point. Overall, though, we're falling back into puritanical purity culture, which, as we've seen historically, does not serve the youth well. I've read the unabridged diary, as I'm sure many of you have, and this 13-year-old girl doesn't discuss anything that other 13-year-olds aren't already thinking about and don't already have questions about. We literally learn through reading. We experience the world through books. We explore different thoughts and ideas and perspectives by immersing ourselves in texts and discussing the concepts within them. That's what school is for.
So in the morning, he may be enrolled in a course at Columbia on the Great Book Series, and he's out in the fields while listening to whatever book is being discussed at that moment. He takes his literature and English classes that way.
Let's talk about education. This is what Betsy DeVos thinks a rural child's education should look like, because every child in a rural area lives and works on a farm. I mean, everyone who's watching this who's from a rural area, I'm right. Come on, let me know in the comments. You all live and work on a farm, every single one of you. But before I get into too many of my opinions on this video, let me give you the whole clip.
Just to put a hypothetical out there, a young man who's living in a rural area in the one of the Dakotas, let's say, and lives on a large family farm. So in the morning he may be enrolled in a course at Columbia on the Great Book series, and he's out in the fields while listening to whatever book is being discussed at that moment. He takes his literature and English classes that way. Then he may go to do an apprenticeship at the John Deere factory, or not the John Deere plant and operation that's not too far away, and learns from the brightest and best engineers on artificial intelligence and engineering and that confluence. And then perhaps he goes in the afternoon to a charter school where he takes some of his core subjects in person with some other classmates.
Working in the fields while you listen to an English book on tape is not what I would consider a well-rounded education. Just like thinking that everyone who lives in a rural area is automatically a farmer is a ridiculous assumption to make. Also, along with the fact that, yes, famously, everyone in a rural town lives near a massive John Deere factory with the best and the brightest in technology available. This is a picture, just a snapshot, really, of what conservatives think your education should be. Because, of course, we want you to get an education while you're also learning how to be a good little worker in the fields. You need to be laboring for us, and then learning can just come second. And we see this kind of attitude spill over into almost every aspect of how they view public education. In other words, not a very strong emphasis on making it better. Instead, conservatives want to make education only accessible to those who already have money, which is why they're always trying to push for more private schools and less funding for public schools. For example, in Texas, Greg Abbott is desperately pushing for private school education. But fortunately, he's receiving some pushback from Democratic progressives in the state who used to be teachers.
Before I was a politician, I was a teacher in an underfunded public school. I taught 45 kids in one classroom. I was a middle school teacher, so that's 45 middle schoolers in one classroom. And it was right after lunch, so you can imagine the chaos. There weren't enough desks for all of my students. So I had kids sitting on the air conditioning unit. In the richest country in human history, we have a school funding emergency in this state, and it is the fault of our state government. So instead of passing a private school voucher scam that will siphon off billions of dollars from our already underfunded public schools, why don't we fully fund our neighborhood schools? Why don't we give every Texas teacher a $15,000 pay raise? Why don't we lower class sizes, hire more counselors, fund more programs for more students? Instead of subsidizing the private education of the wealthy few, why don't we invest in our public schools that are meant for all of us?
Education should be a right, not a privilege for the wealthy few who can afford it because, you got to send your kids to private school. We need to fund our public schools because everyone deserves a chance to an equal education.